Janet Cowell, welcome to WRAL.
Thank you.
Affordable housing is a huge problem in Raleigh. We've been seeing drips of progress, but this still remains a top issue for so many people. What are you going to do to address this?
Well, you're right, it is a very important issue because we've all seen the cost of living here escalate dramatically in the past few years. So one is knowing how do you facilitate the building of housing by private sector. I think the past two councils have made a number of reforms trying to facilitate and allow for more flexibility in types of housing across the city, and particularly in transit corridors. From a city perspective, of course, we've passed the affordable housing bond, so another, I think, good move. We could do more to help stabilize families that have been in place for a long time. So there are weatherization programs, there are things like home repair programs. They don't serve a whole lot of people. I mean, great programs, but I would love to work with the business community and other stakeholders to see how we could scale those to help more people stay in their homes longer. Another idea, so I was the state treasurer. There is a tool called tax increment financing, which just at its basics is when you're making a major public investment, draw a line, say what's the baseline value here, and as that public investment escalates, you could take some of that value and plow it back in subsidy for affordable housing or other programs. So that's a tool that Raleigh has not used much, and I would love to see us use it like Charlotte, Durham, and other cities have.
I think you just answered my next question, but I want to give you the opportunity to answer it if you'd like in a different way. You've said on our WRAL program on the record months ago that the city has not done a good enough job of tackling affordable housing, and what you were just describing perhaps is one thing that they missed. But what else has the city missed here?
Yeah, I think the big, you think about it, supply, subsidy, and stability are three components of affordable housing. And so I think they're attacking supply, and we could do better on the metrics and measuring where that supply is, and also making sure that supply isn't all in areas like Southeast Raleigh that have already been saturated with affordable housing projects. On the subsidy, again, I think we've done some things on the affordable housing, and I do think we could partner more looking at city-owned land, or even state land, long-term leases on land that the state may not want to sell. Are there ways to use government property? We have the Raleigh Housing Authority, which, because it runs public housing, has tools that nobody else has, and sort of vouchers and things. Is there a way to work more closely with the Raleigh Housing Authority to use city-owned land to do housing? So I think that stability piece of allowing more people to stay in their neighborhoods, to stay in their homes, is probably the weakest point to date, and I would work on all three, but that's one in particular. Interesting,
an important one for sure. I want to talk to you about downtown revitalization now. There are pockets of really interesting places where people can go and enjoy, and has a lot of energy and has an identity, but those places are really connected by other parts of the city that don't have much of an identity and not a lot going on. And some would say that that has contributed to a lack of character in the city of Raleigh. So what would you do to make the city a place where there is character and energy throughout, not just in pockets?
Yeah, absolutely. So recently I was having lunch with the head of the Museum of Natural Sciences downtown, which I'm sure many of us have gone to, and she was stating, it's just really rare that anybody gets all the heads of those museums together to talk about how they can work off of each other and maybe encourage people to, make a half day of it. You go to Marbles with your kid in the morning, and then maybe you go over to the Science Museum and you stop at the coffee shop or the lunch spot. So one thing is just the power of a mayor to convene and have that allow people to think through, well, what are the ways, churches, a lot of people go to church downtown. How are we encouraging people to stay or feel safe, and brunch, and how are we working together on those kind of things? The other, I served in the General Assembly, so I know the government complex well. I'm state treasurer. There are 20 blocks downtown that have no retail.
Wow.
So one idea, and again, I think Paul Cowell, who is the ex-mayor of Raleigh, who clearly cares about Raleigh, manages a lot of the property portfolio. So certainly would love to just hear, does the General Assembly, do they have ideas on how they'd like to maybe think about those 20 blocks and anything they'd like to do differently?
You've mentioned so many people who have, they've got a lot of power and a lot of, their business partners in the community. And How do you engage them as well as hear the voices of everyday people?
Well, as you state, it is challenging the people, the underheard voices, I think, renters, young people, and folks who may be struggling to make ends meet and have had to leave the city or even, leave the county, so their voices are no longer heard. I think just knowing that that is a challenge and working to develop programs or technologies. Everybody, mostly has a smartphone. Mm-hmm. Can we develop more two-way technology? My understanding is there's the See-Click Fix program, but that's sort of, I see a pothole and you never hear back. I do think the city's working on a more upgraded and interactive model. So things like that, tools like that are important to facilitate community engagement and not just hear from the usual suspects or those with money or time.
Yeah, yep. You want to implement a forward-looking rezoning plan. What does that look like?
Well, like I said, I think some of the changes made over the last 2 years have been in the right direction. Mm-hmm. And I think there are changes that could be made to those. Part of that's working with the city to understand how has this all gone. My understanding is there are a lot of new units being built. But again, I think we could use better tools like these spatial zoning maps to see where were these developments, and is the time and the ease at which people are getting approvals fast enough. Mm-hmm. I was talking to a friend who was getting an accessory dwelling unit, these backyard units, and I think it's supposed to be a pretty quick process. As with many things, it didn't seem as quick as it maybe should be.
Yes.
So one could just be the efficiency at which we allow the changes that have already been made to actually be executed.
Right, happen. To public safety now, you talk about wanting to support our patrol officers. Does that mean raising their pay, increasing officers on the street? What does that look like?
So the current city council, again, I give them kudos. They raised the public safety pay 10% in this most recent budget. That is a good start. We know that right now the city of Raleigh police were paid some of the lowest in the county and surrounding area, which is obviously not a long-term sustainable. Mm-hmm. So we will need to continue to make pay increases, and there's a big pay study coming out the beginning of next year. So I will be looking to that and working with the city staff to implement for not just police, but public safety and all city employees. The other issue would be, yes, more police on the streets. We have a lower ratio of police per population than many other cities. Maybe that speaks to the fact that Raleigh has been a safe place to live. I think I saw a survey, and a large majority of people feel pretty safe in their neighborhoods, and that's a good thing. But as we grow, continuing to have a really thinly staffed police and public safety staff is not ideal. No. And then finally, I know many of us have seen an increase in the unhoused, more panhandling issues where it's some of our neighbors in distress. And the police has created an ACORNS unit, which is about mental health, social workers, clinical psychologists, trying to assist people that really aren't a public safety hazard. What they need is social services. So I am a big supporter of continuing to build those kinds of programs so that police can be freed up to really focus on safety and not other issues.
In your conversations with people in the public safety community, does the ACORNS unit need to be expanded?
So I was talking to one beat cop, and she said 12-hour shifts, 1 call an hour, 6 of those are social services.
Wow.
So I think she, acknowledged that the ACORNS unit or, other programs, Durham has a unit that's actually independent of the police. Again, that may be politically, sensitive, but certainly looking at best practices and outcomes is critical to making the decisions on how to allocate your dollars.
As former state treasurer, I have to ask you, with all of these big ideas, how do you pay for them?
Well, some of these things, zoning, obviously, is not. For the compensation, that is a big ticket item. The current city council, in the most recent property tax increase, has reserved over $20 million to put towards some of these compensation plans. But you're right, we have to take a hard look at the budget. So One of the things I've noted is that the general administrative expenses for the city have grown to about 20%. I mean, generally, if you're a nonprofit, maybe 15%. So taking a hard look at what are some of these costs that may not be direct services, what are programs that are working, what are programs that aren't working, and looking at efficiency and effectiveness.
Mm-hmm. What do you want Raleigh to look like in 10, 15 years?
Well, we're going to have more density. We're going to have more apartment buildings, more duplexes, more townhomes, because there's just not that much land left for a lot of sprawling development. But inside of that, we all know we're a southern city that's always had nature and parks and trees and this incredible greenway system. I would love for us to really embrace that, and just as an example for the greenways, when you think about like Crabtree Mall, mm-hmm. It's on a greenway, but you wouldn't know it because they've turned the back of the entire mall as if it was just a drainage ditch. Turning things towards greenways, and I think some of the more recent developments are looking at these greenways as amenities and a place where you can re-engage with nature as a citizen of the city. And I think that's also an area, speaking back to budget, where you can get citizens engaged. I run a park right now, and there are so many people who want to volunteer in parks, volunteer to do cleanups or mulches, or feel engaged in their own community, mm-hmm. and get their hands back in the dirt and just experience nature or bird watch, et cetera. So I think there's a ton of latent goodwill in the citizenry that could be planting native species, that could be getting invasives out of trees, helping clean up the greenways, and both save money, but more importantly, build community and re-engage with nature, even though we're a big growing city.
You are elected, it's day one. What's your first priority?
Well, the first priority is really working with the current council. One of the challenges has just been, all these divisions in the community and the country, and some of that spilled over to the city council table, and setting a tone, working together with my compatriots, mm-hmm. and figuring out what their priorities are, right? Working with the citizenry and trying to help just everybody come together to make Raleigh a city that works for everybody.
Cowell, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.